I have been fangirling you both hard now since we met in Jan. Let's not make this anything other than that. It's just been 100%. One long fangirl
session.
Yeah, it has.
Over the DMs, back and forth.
Me being true. Like, please continue to raise the children I've never had. They need to see you.
That's so generous. Oh my God, I love that. That's so nice.
Can I be naughty and just say that you are phenomenal? The space that you've made, and as you know, because you mixed race girlies, there's not in our lifetime been a ton of ladies who look like you doing what you do, making space for conversation, empathy, understanding. And I think the reason I've been fangirling so hard is because I know how much it takes to make yourselves this vulnerable and make space for people and dig into something where you could constantly feel like you're going to be cancelled, but you dig in. And I just think it's glorious.
Welcome back to Mixed Up. I'm Emma.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we're interviewing one of our favourite artists, Beka.
Beka is a singer-songwriter who gained a cult following during lockdown. She began her career as a touring musician and has supported the likes of Han and Griff on tour.
She has an eye for the most beautiful things and pens grippingly emotional song lyrics and melodies.
You're making me blush.
Blush your way. It's good for the complexion.
Thank you. That means a lot, actually. I think that's exactly it. You've picked up on kind of what makes this such an endeavour. It is really vulnerable and it is quite exposing at times, but also we get to speak to some incredibly interesting people. So yeah,
people like yourselves who've been super generous with their time and their stories, which is of course why we're here today and why we really wanted to speak to you, because I think also your story is a little bit different to quite a few of the people that we've spoken to already for this podcast, because obviously you're mixed by way of both of your parents who are mixed. And so I just wanted to start from the beginning, start from your childhood and growing up, and what it's like growing up with two mixed parents.
Yeah, I don't think I realised this was a weird thing until maybe the last 5 years.
Sure.
Because we just grew up in our house, me and my brother, mum and dad.
Yeah.
They're both mixed race. We had major mixed race pride. And I think our big thing was our parents and grandparents are from around the world.
Yeah.
And the story was interesting because of the grandparents' story and the heritage story and grandma. But I don't think I really knew that mixed race people don't seem to make babies with mixed race people until recently. And I have many theories on why that is.
I want to know the theory.
Tell us the theory. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go.
So because we're ever-growing as a demographic, I don't think we would have seen a ton of people who look like us around. So when you do, you're kind of like, oh, you look a bit like me.
Yeah.
Cousin. Yeah. Sister, brother. You're on the park and you're telling people this new friend of yours who looks like you is your sibling, and they're definitely not.
Yeah.
So I think we tend to look at one another and think, you look like my brother or sister.
Yeah.
I dated a mixed race guy once, and if I look at him now, all I see is my own face.
Oh, wow.
I just think you look so much like me. So that's my theory, that we think we look alike.
That's so funny.
I know.
I love that.
Anyway,
theory.
I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah, in our family, so my dad's side of the family, he is mixed. He's got blue eyes as well, which was a very rare thing for back in the day. They're bright blue, and he's darker than me. Then his dad is Nigerian, his mum is white British, but he was adopted at 6 weeks old into an all-white British family, 3 ginger sisters, Chinese sister, and him. And they grew up in North Yorkshire. So that was a whole story that we knew our whole lives. Yeah. That was always a thing. And I don't mean a thing in the sense of a problem, just more a part of our story, just a thing. And then on my mum's side, she has a white British mother from North Yorkshire and a black Vincentian dad, St. Vincent and the Grenadines of the Caribbean, of the West Indies. So we grew up very much knowing that part of our blackness and going there a lot and feeling this sort of, international sense of, wow, we're from all these different places. Yeah. And I was taught that I would call it an African Indies, that we're from both of these places. And I think it wasn't until I got older and met other people who looked like me that I realised most of the time you're from one of those places, Africa, Caribbean, not both. And, obviously, probably not adopted.
I have the question for me that springs to mind, or the thing that I thought of immediately was obviously moving to this country from the States. I know that like there is such Caribbean pride and there's such African pride, and like it feels like in jest there's obviously like jestful like beef between the two. Like how does that play? Yeah.
It ain't always a jest.
Let's be real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like you must get that too, obviously, like with you and your husband. Like is like what is the vibes in like the household with that?
I love that so much. So because we didn't know our Nigerian side until my dad met his birth dad, there was no beef because Dad had grown up really not knowing anything about his blackness. You know that phrase where people will say, you're the whitest black person I've ever met, and it's just like deeply offensive.
Yeah.
Or whitest mixed race person I've ever met. But for my dad, he genuinely is like a white British man, as he was raised by two white British parents with no understanding of his black heritage. And he often says like, oh, he's so funny. He'll be like, I couldn't speak patois. I couldn't speak patois. And I loved reggae. Yeah. And he used to like go to the ballet. I think he ballet danced for a bit. He played the cello. Wow. And his only thing was like, I love reggae. And then as he became sort of 17, left home, still it was like, I don't really feel like I fit in here. Yeah. And that's because he was not West Indian. He was Nigerian. So it wasn't until he met his dad, like later in his life, that he was like, oh, this is my blackness. And then how do you absorb that blackness at that point of your life? What does that mean?
How old was he at the time again?
I think he was in his 40s.
Yeah. Okay. So quite into his adulthood then.
Can we pause for a moment? Are you just a family of artists? Ballet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like just dropped like.
You know what? No, this was when he was a child. Yeah, he then went on to be. Yeah. Well, do you know what? I think Mum would have been a dancer if she could. Yeah. I don't know why she wasn't, but maybe that wasn't like seen as a thing to do. Yeah. But she's still now. I think she's waiting for her Strictly Come Dancing moment.
Oh my God,
which will come through her, her Oprah show that she'll start, and then they'll ask her to be on Strictly.
Gotta be careful of the curse though.
Oh, the Strictly curse. Well, Mum's actually single, so maybe we would just embrace said curse. Okay. Thank you, Mum. Yeah. For a nice 20-year younger. Bring it.
Fair.
Yes. I love that.
Okay. So it's really interesting to talk about your identity, but as an artist, I think, and how far you've felt comfortable talking about being mixed and whether that has formed part of your identity as an artist. Because I feel like one of the common themes that always comes up is this kind of slight apprehension maybe about talking about being mixed, and like you mentioned it in the beginning, like it's quite vulnerable to be in that conversation. So yeah, I'm interested to know whether it's something that you've always felt comfortable with from an identity perspective, particularly as an artist, and also like how the industry responds to that.
I think because we grew up in this home where being mixed was what we were as a family, we had this immense sense of pride. Yeah. That just in who we were, not necessarily in our mixedness. And then as we grew older, we learned a bit more about my grandparents' story on my mum's side. And my granddad, long story short, granddad came from nothing, wanted to become a doctor, came to the UK to study all forms of medicine to take it back to St Vincent, was moved by the NHS, met my grandma, they were here for like 15 years. Wow. He studied, they got married, they then went back to St Vincent. My mum was their first child. She was 6 weeks old when they went back on a boat. So as a woman, you're like, as you get older, you start to hear these stories and think, one, my grandma's a gangster. Yeah. How the heck do you go to a Vincentian island that's not very developed and raise mixed race babies? And it brings all these thoughts. And so I think it wasn't until I started to click into a bit of the awe around the two different races that made me that I then started to probably embody a bit more of the revelation that I am mixed race, because it had been so normal in our family. But I also went to a school where there was one other mixed race girl. And then my brother, when he started school, and people asked me, like, does he rap and play basketball before he started? Oh so, by that point, being in school, I kind of felt like I was a bit different. I was hairy. I didn't know how to do my hair.
Not the hair.
Not their
gosh,
hair. Do you know what
don't
I
take
mean?
me back.
Their hair, like doing it every morning and not getting to have the bouncy blowout.
Yeah.
I had a massive bottom. Mum would make me wear stupid school trousers. You know, like you're kind of hitting against feeling different to all these other girls whose bodies and everything are very different, but feel normative.
Right.
And then I had this one woman who started the church that I used to go to when I was a kid, teenager, called Beka Prance. And Beka Prance started school with kind of hair like yours. Like it was big, bouncy, but like ginormous. She used to wear these Doc Martens, and when she'd walk, her hair would like bounce. And I was just like awestruck. And I feel like it only takes that like one person who has something that you've been trying to avoid about yourself to make you accept yourself sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's maybe where, in a long roundabout way, that acceptance started, which I then kind of didn't pick back up until I started to become an artist, where I was hitting against things in myself, about myself as a woman, about my hair, etc., that I hadn't realised I'd been battling with my whole, 20s, teenage years, 20s, and then suddenly, boom, one day, having my first shoot and being like, how do I actually wear my hair for this? Is it okay if I slick it back? Is there too much five head? Like if I
Don't. The five head is like my literal nightmare.
It's a
Like
revelation.
I'm still grappling with my five head. That's why I have a fringe.
But I look at Rihanna. My go-tos for this are Rihanna and Alicia Keys.
Yes.
Those girls are rocking a 5.5 head.
5.5.
I'm here for the head.
Here for the head.
I think it looks great.
Every time I
Thank you.
say anything about that, my dad is like, "Not you again with this five head nonsense."
But it's so real.
I know.
Like, you look at
I'm like, "You gave me this head."
I know. It's your damn head.
It's your head.
They're scraping it back, being like, am I allowed to have this much light being transmitted off my five head? So I think maybe, as a woman becoming an artist, suddenly having things that meant that I was then revisiting these teenage gripes that I'd had, that maybe my parents would have said, you just got to love yourself. If you don't love yourself, who's going to love you? So you start being like, I'm fine. And then you realise, no, I'm not fine.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you remember the moment that you kind of felt like, I'm not fine?
Yeah, I do. I had my first shoot. I released music that first year of COVID, I think 2020, after having done other music like for my whole life, but this was the first moment I was about to release my first song.
Your music.
My music, Beka music. And I think we were kind of in the Jan time before I was like, found my indie label, before we had a proper team involved. And a friend had said, I'd love to shoot you. And I was thinking, I can use these pictures.
Right.
And I'm packing everything up. And I know that there's going to be a makeup artist. And I'm thinking, you know what? I bet you she's not going to have my colours. And then I was like, hang on, how do I actually wear my hair? Because I don't think I want it like big and out and curly.
Right.
Can I scrape it back? How am I going to be able to count on my hair for that day? I think that was actually really more of it.
That's it. And
That's
you know
the
what? I
thing.
relate to that so much.
Yeah.
Because I think, and obviously there's a brilliant film that recently got released that's all about this. But it's like, does everyone have what I need for my hair to look good, for this to work?
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
There's so much
And
in that
there's
sentence.
There's so much in that, even down to like, and I know like, you will have heard me say a million times, I just need it to be round, and I need it to be right, and I need everyone to be checking for this, because if it's not right, then I wish I hadn't worn it like this.
Yeah, of course.
You can't wear it like this and it not be right. But you can go onto a set and no one will know, no one will understand what that even means,
Oh, completely.
what that looks like.
And it could be really obviously not right, and no one will say for fear of saying the wrong thing, or because they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will they have what I need?
Exactly.
Is it going to be round and
Is-
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that needs putting on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
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 And it was that exact sentence that morning that I had. And how am I going to feel being there and saying it's not right? Having to kind of advocate for just the fact that I knew I didn't look like myself. So I'm there with my like products that I never normally use because I'm kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a conditioner with me.
Everything.
I'll take a mask with me. I'll take everything. And I'm in the toilet. And they wanted a few looks. And you know, like our hair,
I mean, if
it's,
we're doing multiple hairstyles,
then we're going to need someone
we
who can
need
do it.
time,
We're gonna need
exactly.
and time.
Yeah.
And this is the really big one, time. Like
yeah.
wash day, it ain't a 30-minute process.
Yeah.
So I think it was that day that I suddenly realized, wow, there are so many things that you just live with all the time.
Yeah.
A feeling that you're going to be a diva if you take time with your white side of your family doing your hair in the morning for the hike we're about to have. You feel awkward about it. The fact that you've just had a fire and your hair now stinks and you're thinking, crap, I don't have like my bits and bobs because your hair absorbs smell. Like all these silly things that you have throughout your development as a mixed race woman, these little things that you just live with. The head wrap with the white husband. Hello, like, let's talk about it. And then it all just coming that day. I know, like, and I remember that day just being like, whoa, this is a lot. And that's what led me to write some of the things I wrote afterwards. I wrote a song called Your Skin.
Yes.
Because I was imagining like young me, just like young Beka being like, I don't know that I feel like I look great in my skin. I don't know that I feel like you're going to have the colours for my face. I don't know that I'm going to feel okay to advocate for myself and not feel like a diva and that word come out and me feel too much and me feel, yeah.
And then there's that idea as well that we as mixed race women and men, obviously we're not men, but for the men out there, don't know how to do our hair, don't know how to look after ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these ideas that are also layered onto, oh my God, is there going to be anyone there that knows what they're doing?
Yeah, that's
and there's
so
so
true.
many ways that you have to protect your image.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's layered.
I think in this modern time as well that we're in, I don't know how you found this, but post George Floyd, I feel like on more sets I'm going on to, there's like a less tolerance of people who can't do everyone's hair. However, that doesn't mean that people that are being hired can actually do everything or can find like colour for my skin. They can like, match it. And I found that really hard in the last few years to still be in spaces where it's said to me ahead of time when we're sending a few little bits and bobs as a rider. Oh, is there going to be someone who's going to be able to do Becca's hair? Blah, blah. Yeah, totally, it'll be fine. And then going and knowing within a few minutes that's not the situation. And then all those things that you feel that you've carried through your whole life, those little titles of very loud, diva, too much. They start, coming up your spine as you want to say like,
Yeah, exactly.
that's not actually quite right.
Yeah.
It's butt clenching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the utmost respect. I rate you so hard because obviously you look impeccable every time I see you.
Yeah.
Every time I scam you,
I'm like,
whatever we're
Not
at.
at all.
I'm like, boom, she's done it again.
She's done it again.
And there's a lot in that. There's just so much in that to get the detail and to kind of
100%.
perfect the look with all those things that we've just talked about. And I personally, I don't think I could be famous for that reason.
You are famous. Hello.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I couldn't be on film all the time.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't be on stage all the time because I would just be constantly worrying about, is everything in place?
Yeah.
And I also think certain people are afforded the luxury of not having everything be impeccable for them all the time. And I know that for the three of us, we're so aware of what that means if we show up anywhere not looking our best, or at least being perceived to be at our best. So yeah, and I can imagine obviously in this space as well, in the music industry, in any creative space, it's definitely it's like heightened almost.
Do you know a big moment for me was realising that me looking me didn't feel very Vogue. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I had this moment where I was imagining myself wearing what I now would wear. a plait here and a plait here, just like 2 plaits.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I
love that
can't.
look.
Thank you so much. And
So
what
great.
time do I always have to be flipping knowing the weather forecast and wearing something?
exactly.
I don't. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just go for these 4 plaits.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like an aesthetic I love is quite high fashion. I love those like Vogue old ladies. That's just give me that all day, every day. Shout to Xandra Rhodes. And that's an aesthetic I love. And I remember thinking, God, through my whole life, I've never really seen myself reflected as in a high fashion way. And I wouldn't class myself as high fashion. I'd think that was cute. And I realized I spent so many years just in every hairstyle that was convenient for me and that all that made my face a shape I liked, it was considered to be cute and not powerful, not like high fashion,
Oh my gosh,
not Vogue.
you're literally in my
not,
brain.
not sexy.
And in mine, it
Yeah.
wasn't until Solange that I...
Queen Solange.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, all having it out because this is maintenance. Like this isn't
my
isn't
gosh.
chill.
It's so not chill.
Sometimes
I think for me, it's fine if I'm just going about my business. It's that capture. But that's also because I know exactly what you mean. You mean it's when people say like, oh, that's not very editorial. She doesn't look very editorial.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Yeah.
that hair won't look very editorial. And that's like, as artists, as creatives, we know what that looks like and when it doesn't look like that. And for me, I guess when I'm looking at particularly myself on camera, I can see when that's just not working, like
Right.
when that's not what it is. And that for me is jarring.
That's the word, jarring. You feel jarred.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, you know, these are age-old topics, the hair, the makeup, but also the representation. When you see, which is why I'm just so gassed about what you do and about your book and about the space that you make, because I think we underestimate the power of seeing ourselves and then giving ourselves permission and all the subconscious that's going on there. And I know that you had our queen, Scary Spice,
Oh yeah.
on. And listening to that whole conversation and thinking, God, had it not been for you, until then Corinne Bailey Ray came, I'd have been screwed. What would I have been doing in those years? I can't be looking at Stevie Wonder. Like, Stevie, he's not even mixed. Do you know what I mean? Without that like representation, you're stuffed. And I think we underestimate the power of the subconscious empowerment that happens when we see one person who is a tiny bit like us and they're doing it normally.
Oh,
And you're like,
completely.
ooh, powerful.
I feel like, to be fair, I do feel like the mixed girlies are having their moment in music right now. There's so many of them that like I love. And then simultaneously, I feel like there is still, I don't want to say backlash, but there's like a bit of like a stereotype about mixed women singers. And people think either they're too visible or they all sound the same and they get everyone confused with each other. This is just the rhetoric that I've seen on, unfortunately, twitter.com. Again, a space that I hate to be on, but I'm on because I am curious to know. This is where that kind of stuff comes out all the time, I feel like. And I'm always really surprised because I'm just kind of like, oh, I didn't realize like people had these kinds of, I didn't think anybody would think any or feel any type way about it, but they do. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your take on that because I think it's, I don't know, I think it's really unfair.
Give us the tea. Do you have any?
What tea do I have? I guess there's that age-old idea that mixed race women are palatable Black women.
Right.
And I think that can be a weight that mixed race women carry in rooms where we're predominantly talking about, let's say, Black music, or in rooms where there aren't many Black people represented. So therefore, you're repping.
That becomes your job,
Yeah, and I think that
by default.
that's, so there's this,
Sure,
know that you're representing in these like various forms, and that can be a bit challenging. Is probably the word I'd use. And then I guess the being pit against each other is just fascinating because the shape of your face, your like vocal cords, your nose, your throat are probably informed by your like genetic makeup, the race that you are. You have a different tone, you have a different voice, and therefore often mixed race voices sound different to a black voice. But you'll get a lineup of backing vocals that are mixed and black, and people will be saying, we want a black sound.
Right. Oh, that's
And
really interesting. I would have never considered something like that.
Yeah, I think for me as a vocalist growing up, I always felt like my voice was deficient. It wasn't black enough.
Right.
And it wasn't until I started working with these guys called Han, who were some good friends from uni. We'd all been at music uni together. Years later, they asked me to come and do BVs. And they'd asked me to sing on this song that was going to be on their album. So I go to the house, we're singing, and I'm going in, like, kind of trying to do what I always do, like sing and give the power.
Yeah.
And then I'll never forget one of them saying, do you know what? That like breathy bit of your voice? It's really beautiful. Can we use that bit of your voice? And it was such a poignant moment because I'd always thought that was a deficient part of my singing. Right. To have like something a bit softer, a little bit aspirate, the tone. Basically, he was saying everything about your voice in the natural way that it is, regardless of, what racial group it sounds like, just your voice. We love that. That's really beautiful. And it changed my life. And I kind of realized I'd been trying to fit into this like thing that I just didn't have in my vocal, regardless, not because of my race, but just that's just not what I had. Which was just like a mind-blowing thing. Be you as you are, you don't have to be something else. And it's probably like a lesson, I think, for a lot of the mixed race experience, isn't it? You're okay as you are.
Absolutely.
I guess the being pit against one another feels like a sort of music industry-wide like issue, female issue, probably.
Totally. I think we've seen it with even the most famous of female celebrities, I think, in general. Our book, The Half of It, is out now.
It's been 4 years writing this, and I'm not punking you. You can actually get it from the show notes now. So order your copy today.
And so, this is just one of many tweets about any mixed. It could be Ray, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
But someone was obviously saying how much they loved Cleo Sol, but then they were like, but I don't want to listen to Cleo if she's one of those crazy biracials, implying if she's one of those biracials with a white mother, which means she's crazy.
Not the crazy biracials.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so boring.
Yeah, it's really boring.
I was on Victoria Park this morning. There was a sweet 5'5", grey-haired white lady. She had a pram in front of her. She was probably in her 60s. And as I walked past, I was thinking, oh, cute. I love when grandmas like take their kids out on their own. Yeah. As I looked in there was a little brown baby. Yeah. And I was like...
I was on my way here and I was in my Uber and I was the same. It was like an older white lady carrying a brown baby, just walking down the street. They both looked like they were loving life. And I was just like, oh, this is just so... It just made me smile. I was just like, oh, I'm so happy to see that because it was just such a normal everyday action that wasn't being made a big deal of. And I think, like you were saying, it's so boring, but it's also, again, it's so lacking in truth and like reality, which is just people, grandparents, parents loving their kids. And that's really it.
When I first moved to East Dulwich, I literally thought it was the home of mixed race people because I was stunned because I was shook. Everywhere I turned, there was a white grandparent with a mixed baby. And
that's so cute.
For me, it felt really like affirming because, that's me and my grandparents.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never really experienced seeing this everywhere before.
Yeah, completely.
And I think what you're saying is exactly it. Like this rhetoric around, well, if this mixed race person's parent is this, then they're this, and blah 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 blah. It is boring, and it's just so I was about to say ahistorical. It's like, it's ahistorical.
That too.
It's not truthful.
Yeah.
It's just really immature.
I think we're also just always lacking in empathy. And I think until you have something confront you on a really human, normal level, you don't have to confront it. So we live in our little fear pockets, don't we?
Yeah, completely.
I remember my amazing mother-in-law, Angie. She's known me since I was 15. And we had this chat once in my 20s where I was like, you know, one day when I have a brown baby, which there's no given, by the way. My husband is white ginger, so who knows? But it will be mixed race.
Yeah.
I was like, it's going to be so fun, like teaching you how to do their hair. She's like, yeah. And I was like, but we're going to have to like hit the market to be able to do it. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we can't go to Boots because this was before, Boots was really thriving.
Exactly.
I was like, we're not going to be able to go to Boots.
Yeah.
Well, Boots is her spice. This is the spice of her life.
Yeah.
She's actually...
This is her place.
She's
her
like
place.
on the advantage card.
Yeah.
Every birthday, we're sending her the Boots voucher so that she can go to Boots and just like deck herself out. She's a mother of 3 boys, so she's like, she's going there for the glam.
Exactly.
This also isn't the epitome of her life, by the way. She's like a very thriving, glorious, wonderful, powerful woman. Anyway, I remember saying to her like, Ange, you actually can't get stuff for my hair really in Boots, and this was the empathy moment, because this was just like her really normal thing where she can just pop to Boots and get her stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And we wouldn't be able to go there to get stuff for your hair. This is insane. And I remember us having this moment where I was like, this is why media, books, art is so important, because we get this little empathy window in the safety of our home that allows us to confront whatever it is that we didn't quite know, and we need to have a broader, like, we can have a broader look at. And even this Christmas, and I don't know why it always makes me like tear up when she does it, but this Christmas she bought me this hair oil. It's like the Afro Co or something. I can't remember what it's called. Hair oil and this other little hair thing.
I think it is called Africa.
It arrived, and I was just opening it, and I was like, why am I feeling emotional? And I think it's, I don't know that a lot of racial groups go around looking for themselves in different places, but I find that mixed race people do. We see a white grandma with a baby in a pram, and we're like, oh my gosh, yeah, the world's changing. We go to East Dulwich and we're like, oh my goodness, there's so many mixed race people here. And I think it's always, it's that we're always kind of looking for that for ourselves. And so I think when we're then seen in that really subtle, gentle, beautiful way, just always, I don't know, for me it's just always like deeply profound.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And meanwhile the rest of the family are like, why are you crying?
I agree.
No, I think you're right, and that, because again, like we're talking about what the reality is for us, in that I know people, again, they so often see, the Netflix TV versions of us. And obviously, of course, we know how important that kind of representation can be and feels. But the reality is a lot of our stories aren't really being told in that way. Like, a mixed person can be cast as the lead in a show, but it's not really telling the stories of like our families, for example. And again, or even the love within our families, because so much of the implication is that people like Ange wouldn't be interested, wouldn't care to gift you something like that. That would be so meaningful, and like, but she obviously knows how much it means to you because she loves you and cares for you. And so that's the thing I find so difficult about seeing those kinds of conversations on social, where I'm just kind of like, you just don't get it. Like, you just don't get it.
I think it's trendier in storylines to have this kind of, because everyone's always looking for this kind of the conflict and the emotional arc of the storyline. So naturally, when you have anything that's about mixed race people or interracial relationships, then they go for the conflict storyline. And so then you do get, it's much trendier to have like a white family that wants to, I don't know, throw out the mixed race kid or whatever.
Yeah.
And we know from all of our research, there's truth in those stories too, but there's so many stories that are just not known, are not being told when it comes to the mixed race experience. And I think even the history, like, people don't really know the history behind the mixed race experience globally. And I think that's where there's this disconnect, where people think, oh, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
But if we are, it's in a really shallow
way.
kind of way.
Yeah.
I think that's such an amazing point. And the stories hearing people's stories and the vast experience of them is just so important and so often not done. But you're right. I feel like in our era of growing up, it was like mixed race person in the next advert and Marks and Spencer's and they're there with their big hair and it's like, you are being repped. And you're like, we're not being repped. We're not being repped. And the stories are, you're so right. It's just the normal story.
Yeah.
My husband,
or no story really, just a face.
Right. But we just want to hear something that feels, or I guess I love hearing the how and the what, like we were saying earlier, like how did you forge this thing? And I think for me, because I don't come from a family where I have two parents who are different races, I'm always really curious as well for my girlfriends where their parents were different races. What was that like? When you're looking at your mum and she is not your colour, what are you thinking? And I'm gonna, in theory, if I get to have children, it's been a topic in my life for so long that we might have a child that doesn't look like me. And I'm like, no, it won't. It's gonna be a mixed race child because I'm mixed race.
Exactly.
And actually, it might not. And that feels like a brand new,
that's a whole
wild,
other thing to
different
navigate.
world for me. Which and how much do you teach your child? And this is something I feel like I'm seeing with all my girlfriends. My goddaughter's mixed race, but you might not know that unless you maybe were mixed race and you knew what that kind of, like a mixed race and a white child might look like. And my bestie, Danielle, is working out, how we raise her children, how me and her raise her kids, because it's our thing.
Exactly. It's your
How
thing.
she raises her children, right? With a sense of their heritage. If you don't look very X thing, are you still X thing? Which I think is fascinating topic.
Of course.
Definitely. I think that brings us on to, I'd really like to talk about your most recent feat.
I love that word.
Want to talk about trying and the incredible work that you've done for the show. But also your personal connection to that. You touched on it a little bit earlier. Can you tell us a bit more about your connection to that work?
Yeah, so I get this call last year, Copenhagen Fashion Week. I'm there with the bestie, terrorising. And we get this call from my...
We need to go.
Oh, guys.
Together.
Let's go again.
Oh my gosh, with Azande. This should be who you met and is in love with you. Yeah, she says hi, by the way.
Hi,
Azande.
I feel like that could be
exactly.
let's be a girl band.
Yeah, exactly.
Done.
Love
that.
Yeah.
So we're there, terrorising, and we get
can
this
sing,
call.
by the way, so
can
this
you
is
actually?
A real suggestion. But we'll come back to
We need
this
to talk about the singing thing after because I actually do have a question. Anyways, go on. Tell the story.
Now I'm very shook. I'm going to try and focus. So Tande, my manager, gives me a call. And earlier, pause the story that hasn't even started to say, the New Year's Day, we have this meal, me, Azande, Jordan, Tando, like a few besties. And we're all talking about one thing. If it could happen this year, what would be the one thing you'd want to do? I'm like, write for film and TV. Same story. It's always been, this would be the dream. So track forward like 3 weeks, Copenhagen Fashion Week. Tando calls and he's like, I don't know what weird powers of manifestation you've been doing, but we've just had a call to ask if you want to write this soundtrack for this Apple TV show called Trying. Have you heard of it? And I'm like, I don't think so, no. And he says, well, this is like a Friday. We've got a meeting with them on Monday. Try and watch whatever you can and, we'll pick it up on Monday. So I get back on the Saturday night. I binge the entire thing Saturday to Monday. And within like a few minutes of the program, you realise it's about adoption. And those moments in your life where you're so shook, you just like sob.
Yeah.
Like, but it's almost like a vomit. You're like, I start crying because to have been asked, like, even if I wasn't going to get it, to have been asked to write a soundtrack, the one thing I want to do, for something about something that is so central to my heritage, I was just like, I cannot believe this is possibly happening.
It was sent to you.
And then it was like terrifying because then I was like, I really want this. And so we go into this meeting, we have it, I get the job, and in essence, the job was to write this soundtrack for this program. And they explore adoption, trying to have children, who can adopt, why should we adopt? And they do it with this like beautiful tenderness that I think the title gets rid of this. The title, not of the show, but just of the kind of vibe they're trying to communicate is, you don't have to be a really special person to adopt. You just need to have a capacity to love and explore and learn. And I think my whole life I've been raised with this idea, all these sentences that come back to me that are, oh wow, people who adopt, hands, like unbelievable, hands up for them, they're amazing, but you've got to be a really special person to adopt, which in so many ways, yes, you do, but also there are so many children that need adopting and so many of us with a capacity to love. So what do you do with those two things? And I think this thing of my dad being adopted is so central to who we are, and yet has always just been a part of my story. So to be able to take a moment to pause and deep dive this with my dad, who is like my best friend, phenomenal dad, has just been a very profound experience. And I think what makes the soundtrack special is that the program has these sort of core emotional beats at the end in these montage moments where the core emotional beats of the program are playing out. And that we were asked to write original songs for all of those scenes. And we were working with this phenomenal director called Ellie Hayden. Guys, if you're ever making any kind of film, she's your gal. She's amazing.
Noted.
Yeah,
Exactly.
note that down.
Amazing.
When they make the story of your life.
Exactly.
And I direct it with Ellie.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is.
Can you play me?
Yeah. Oh my God! You heard it here first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Casting announcement.
Oh my God. Yeah, she has been amazing because she was new on the show. And she's just this so empathetic, has a way of making every single person not just feel seen, but be seen. And she worked with me and Toby Tripp, who I wrote the album with, in this like triangle where she would say, this is what we need for this scene and this moment. These are maybe some of the themes. And then we'd kind of scurry away and do it. The first day that I found out we got it, me and my dad and my brother, we all think we're secret agents. I think because we're all neurodivergent, we have this like desire for urgent, like put us in a crisis, phenomenal. Ask us to pack for a holiday, horrendous. So we think we're secret agents in our head. My dad also has a very James Bond energy. And the day that
I've seen a picture of your dad. He could in fact be the next James Bond.
Hello!
I feel.
I'm trying to launch his modelling career because now he's got to that age where he's so gorgeous, and he's also, he's giving like Ian Wright, like uncle energy.
Exactly.
Yeah, trying to launch his career. Right. So while he was in his other career as James Bond, we were all trying we were sat talking to Dad, or Zooming, me, my brother and him. And we were like, Dad, do you have much stuff from finding your birth dad? And as he starts to unpack how he has this like box of the letters, and, it's just like so moving to hear. And then we were like, your birth mum, who we understand hasn't wanted to have that relationship with you, which is completely her prerogative. I wonder if she's still alive. And so we're kind of like, we're having this really deep, conversation, slightly trying to, investigate whether she's still alive, and then being like, let's pull the James Bond energy back a little bit and like give her space. But yeah, just like a deeply, deeply profound evening of us being a bit naughty.
And what is it like as well, like bringing him into the songwriting process? Like, how active was he? As in, like, did you spend much time there, like, talking through all of that? Yeah.
How did you ask him questions? Because I'm imagining trying to get information out of my dad that I could in fact use for my work. And I feel like it would be an impossible task.
I love that.
That's
My
so
dad
funny.
is a talker, so he was
yeah.
open for the questions. But I think, when you're asking somebody about them, it's all he's ever known. What's it like being adopted? Well, I've only ever known being adopted.
Exactly.
I've only ever known being the only mixed race man or person of colour in my entire village. I've only ever known having everyone in my family not look like me, and every time we go somewhere, everyone know the most intimate thing about me. So I think I had to really try to empathise and be curious in order to help him see that those little things that are super normal to him are very special and fascinating. So I think maybe it was in the power of the questions. But I found for my dad in this last year that we've been, in this album world, he's been unpacking things more about his experience as well, which has been quite precious. We had a little listening party recently, and to have him there and like some really precious people and some of the trying team, I was just watching him and I was thinking, wow, this must be quite profound to have been adopted and then have a child write about your experience and then have all these people gather round and note and almost like honour
and commune over this experience. I think it's fascinating because when we started this podcast, initially, I don't know about you, but I didn't realise adoption was
going to be
huge
so
thing.
major. Yeah.
Really?
No, we didn't realise, but then we just kept on having it crop up, or people would contact us, and people were constantly saying they were adopted, and it was obvious that this was a huge theme
it's
that
like
we needed.
Part of our stories in a way that we didn't expect.
Yeah. And that's when we discovered that due to the politics around, and we write about this in the book, around interracial mixing, so many children were given up because mothers were encouraged, forced, or persuaded to give up their children. And, you know, mixed race babies were really kind of painted as monsters. And this kind of happened globally and in so many different places. And I think we had one person on the podcast who literally phrased it as a generation of mixed race children in care. And that was when it really struck me, this is a topic that is integral to our experience. So I suppose I wondered whether you had sight of that when you were writing, and if your dad has kind of a broader understanding of that.
It's so fascinating to hear that because I had no idea. I think it's kind of until you've just said it. And I think it's kind of in the same way that my dad's Nigerian. We've not been to Nigeria yet. I want to save that for like the BBC. Just send us all and be like, and take it.
I want to come. Can I be part of the crew?
Absolutely, yeah. We need a few just hot babes for the trip. But
Can be roadies.
Literally. And I remember him when he went, he had one Nigerian friend and he said, what do I need to take? And the one Nigerian friend, Remy, was like, take gifts. And my dad, you know, went and came back. But other than that, he doesn't know loads about this as a thing because it just was his life experience. Years into his sort of journey, a few years into his journey of trying to find his birth parents, through a series of like really wondrous coincidences, he found, using his dad's last name and the sort of adoption records, he ended up finding his birth dad, and those records were then taken away as a thing. You were no longer allowed to access it a year later. So had he not had this one friend who'd done the same process, he'd never have found his birth dad. And my dad's story is one where he was adopted and given to foster parents for 6 weeks and then taken in a Land Rover to North Yorkshire to be adopted, just by a random person just drove him to be adopted. And we were told, and he was told his whole life, that your parents didn't want you and you've been given up. And my dad says that as a kid, he would always imagine his dad as like an African king and that he was the son of a prince. And even when he's saying that now as a woman, it brings me to tears. But he then found out a few years before his adoptive mum died that actually his parents were in love and they wanted to get married, but their parents wouldn't let them. And my granddad, we did know this second bit, that my granddad, Nigerian granddad, wanted to take him back to Nigeria, but politically wasn't allowed with what was happening in Nigeria, and also just as a black man in England in the 60s. He wasn't allowed.
Taking a child out of the country, I'm sure would have been a problem.
Also a recurring thing.
Right. But what was allowed was that he was given to foster parents, then driven in a
car by a
Morris Meyer or
stranger.
whatever it's called to go to another family. And of course that's my dad's, like, that's the plan A for his life. That's what he very much believes, and that's been a beautiful thing. But this part of his story is like so mind-blowing. So what you're saying makes so much sense, because when he then found out that he was kind of born in love and that he knew his mum had been sent away to have him, but when he then later contacted her, we don't know, we assume that her family don't know anything of my dad, because she sort of said, for you to come back into my life would blow up my life.
Right.
Actually, a bit of a mad story that I think you'll love is that on this topic, when my dad was fostered and in his journey trying to find his birth parents, he goes back to Eastbourne, where he was born, and goes to the one address that he found from said book that got disbanded years later. And he goes to the address, knocks on the door, and someone opens it, and he's like, "Hello, I'm Jeremy Whittle. You might have known me as," and then says his birth name. Yeah. And they say, and he says, I think you were possibly the people who fostered me. And they say, "Oh, that's actually not us, but we will give you the address. That person has moved up the road." So he gets back in his car, goes up the road, because he thinks he's James Bond. He gets to the door, he knocks on the door, and this older lady opens the door, and he says, "Hi, gives the adoptive name. I think you had me in the first, 6 weeks of my life." And she, instantly she thinks he's sort of social services. Then as he explains it, she realizes, "Oh no, I do remember you actually." Yeah. And she says, "Do you want to come in for a cup of tea?" So he comes in, and in that front room, in front of a fire, lying on a fluffy rug, was a mixed race baby and a Chinese baby.
Oh my God.
And my dad is a mixed race man and has a Chinese sister. Yeah. And my dad just said it was one of the most wild moments of his life, looking at these two deeply vulnerable children, because babies are vulnerable. Yeah. And realizing, my life could have gone a really different route. Yeah. And all that I have now, I'm so deeply grateful for, all the sense of me. Yeah. Everything that happened in my adoptive family, my British family, that made me me. It's all been part of a story that was important and right and good for me. Yeah. But just mind-blowing. And to think that would have been so many people's stories, and now I find mixed race babies are something that people would say, "I want a mixed race baby." They'd be like, "I want to find a mixed race baby."
Yeah. She's equally weird.
Yeah. Very, yeah.
Very strange.
And that was the start of his life, was just this kind of wild ride in a Land Rover.
Yeah. It all started in a Land Rover.
How old your dad is?
My dad is 63.
Okay.
I think he's actually maybe 64. No, he's 63. He's 63.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think given the fact that you said that you and your dad and brother, I think, are neurodivergent, we talked about this, we've talked about this personally, about you being diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm interested to know, obviously, the experience of that. What was that like for you in terms of seeking out the diagnosis? But also, you've written such beautiful work around this. So what's that songwriting? Did the songwriting process change for you, do you feel like, when you got that diagnosis?
Yeah. The year I found out I had ADHD, I'd started this song, and I remember being in the session and just feeling like a way I'd been feeling so many times that week, which was I'm getting to these sessions late, I feel like a whirlwind, and I'm actually quite an ordered person, which I now understand is part of it. Love routine, love structure. So that in the morning, but also arriving late, feeling all over the place, haven't prepped in the way I'd have liked to. But ultimately feeling like I'm watching everyone else sit kind of serene, and I am spilling over all over the place. And so got to this session where I felt quite safe with the guy. But the morning before, I'd been in another session where I'd been making a cup of tea as a little break, and just having this just crying in the session, because I just felt so full of shame at how much I felt like I was jarring everyone. And so I'm kind of bringing this, and had this little moment whilst crying where I was like, "It's actually quite a nice lyric." And just the classic, the artist, writing my pain. And started writing this start of the song, which became a song called Tears. And it starts with I'm spilling over, stains all over the floor, just feeling like I'm an absolute mess. And then in the sort of September of that year, I was trying to book a holiday. I had glandular fever. And I was there on the sofa, having just moved house into this place that was boiling hot in the heat wave.
Yeah, great.
And I had 74 tabs open. just all the time. Like
in your brain or
another,
on the
no, literally on the computer.
Okay.
Another idea. Well, and it
I
felt
was like,
that
that's
in my
me
brain.
in my brain.
Yeah,
That's me in my brain
literally.
too.
Another idea. Oh, maybe if I see, maybe
Yeah.
And eventually I was just like, why am I like this? Why can I not just do normal adult stuff? And I know so many people, you know,
I feel
listening.
like you're diagnosing me right.
I know.
Well,
right
the
now.
thing is, that's the thing. Everybody feels like they can relate to all these things because they are things we experience as adults. And then I had been kind of on this pathway where I'd heard, because of the radio presenter Abby Mack, I'd heard about her diagnosis and been reading a bit about it. And because of that, the algorithm caught me, and I'd been like reading different things about these symptoms.
Yeah.
So throughout the year, I'd been thinking like, this is wild, because if these are symptoms, number one, like my life has changed forever.
Yeah.
How amazing. And number two, surely they can't be symptoms, because I didn't know I was allowed to have these as a reason for the way I am.
Yeah.
Which again is like the shame of the neurodivergent woman talking. And so after this TABS moment, I kind of went back and got in touch with her and was just like, how did you get diagnosed? Because I need some help.
Yeah.
So start on the process where you can do tests online yourself that would then tell you whether you should go off and get diagnosed. And as I'm doing these tests, it's like, A stars, you got a first, boom, 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 boom. And I think then as I was,
you are definitely going to be an astronaut.
literally, girl, you got it. You got the ADHD. As I then continue to explore it and explore, you know, getting diagnosed officially, you start then going through this process where you are reading books about it, reading and listening to interviews, and it's just the wildest thing, I think, as an adult woman, to find out your entire life you've been neurodivergent. Now, I would have thought ADHD. I thought, number one, it was fake years ago. Definitely, I was one of those, it's fake. What is ADHD? Because all you know is that it's this thing that boys have at school that everyone says, like, boys have got it.
That is true.
Then when you read about the way it presents in women, it's this, like, masking very often in school, excellence, presentation, always perfect presentation.
Right.
But also, as you then become an older woman, as you go to uni, you know, your ability to mask those things becomes harder and harder. And the shame that you carry because you, all the things that you're always being told, is you're a bit too much, you're a bit loud. Can you stick to like one topic? Or you notice yourself interrupting, and just tons of things that if I was to give you a list of them, you might be like, yeah, I do some of those sometimes. Whereas this is an inability to do it another way.
Right.
And I think it's taught me so much about being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, being something in a world that facilitates another way is like deeply challenging, isn't it? You're always battling against something. So this song, Tears, I ended up finishing it after being diagnosed, where I was just like, I just can't spend all my time masking. I can't spend all my time apologizing for things. And that's not to say it's easy now, because now I'm presented with the reality that sometimes I might want to write ahead and say, hey guys, by the way, these are some of my specific needs. And you feel just like a goose being like, these are my needs. But like, why not? We all have needs. We all have ways that we're facilitated and we work best. And my ability to direct my focus is different to others.
Yes.
And it needs facilitating, but that feels like an ongoing journey. And I think advocating for our needs as mixed women is like a topic in itself. And my amazing therapist, the bae of my life, never leave me. She's been a really safe space for all this stuff of that you're not too much. You're actually allowed to say, this is what I need, and you're not responsible for the other person. You're responsible for you and advocating for you. It's been mad, but good.
I've one more question, which is light for us to finish off on. So, as you know, I love your style. I think it's impeccable.
I think
it's
so
an incredible intersection of like art, silhouette, detail. Everything's just being done impeccably for my taste. If I was still a stylist, I would want to be involved.
Be involved.
Oh my God, yeah.
I'm not a stylist anymore, and I'm happy that I'm not a stylist anymore.
Once a stylist, always a stylist.
Yeah,
that's it. You know when you can
Exactly.
spot, like, as soon as I saw
That's so
you,
true.
I remember the moment I saw you in your yellow dress.
Oh my God.
And I was like,
that was our night,
I think I
wasn't
still
it?
have that photo saved. I'm
the night we
pretty
fell in
sure.
love.
yeah, it was backstage, and I saw you, and I was like, Wait a minute. This is a 10. A 10.
This is a 10.
And a 10. Yeah, I wanted to know, do you have specific inspirations?
Yes.
Or an inspiration or muse?
Give us the tea.
You know those videos of those like old women in New York
Oh yeah.
who are 70 plus
Yeah.
and they look unreal, like
Yeah,
Iris Apfel.
Yeah.
For me, that is my style inspo.
Yeah.
It's like women who are just like done caring about all this rubbish, done living like we're gonna live forever.
Yeah.
They wear what they want, loving their bodies, vibing. Those are my that is it for me. That, and also I think I'm mad for a silhouette. I love shape, and maybe that's like about our hair. But I think shaping is just like my favorite. I'm someone who, if I have a bouquet of flowers, it'll be like one flower. I like sort of block and structured things.
This is your ADHD as well, because
Maybe,
the detail's insane. Because for me, what I love about your styling is that you're always doing something outlandish, but it's just right. It's like just on the edge of like being like what I would call pony or like passe.
Yeah,
because
like it's never
it just
too
never
much.
edges over. It's just always just perfectly on the nose.
I don't know how to take that, so I'm just going to say thank you.
Yeah.
Take it in a good way. 'Cause
Take
I'm
it.
feeling shy.
Because it
Bask
is.
in it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also, the West Indian colours, which we're surrounded by right now.
yeah.
You know, there's like pigmented pastels.
That's
true.
You've literally just connected for me.
Wow.
Why I'm obsessed with this space, but also why I was like, you will be great in this space.
That's such a good point.
Pigmented
Yeah.
pastels, where they're not just like a bright colour, it's like a colour that's like infused with pigment.
Yeah.
and no fear of things.
Yes, exactly. Fearless.
Fearless, like y'all.
What a way. I was like, yeah, what a concept to end on.
Yeah.
I love
it.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap, ladies.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode.
If you enjoyed it, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so you can catch the next one.